Hello and welcome to this edition of 401k and Beyond. This is a very special show, as I guess I probably say that every show, but Nancy's really special this time around. Um, so for our YouTube and our Facebook group, it's 401k and Beyond. And when I initially put that together, there's a million videos out there about Roth conversions and the 4% rule and all the numbers and dollars and cents that go in behind it. But I wanted to get into the Beyond, and I think Nancy's a perfect guest to have a chat with. It's like, okay, you've got the money, you want to retire. Now what? So what is that Beyond? So it's Nancy Schwartz. She is from Envision Healthy Retirement, and we're happy to have her on the program. How are you, Nancy?
I'm totally awesome. Thank you, Brian. I'm very excited to be here and such a great opportunity to share with your audience some really important points besides the finance, right?
Right. So let's start off with a little quick hit here and see if we can add some value right away. So if somebody was retiring tomorrow, or let's say today, even just November 30th and December 1st is their first day of retirement, what's the one best piece of advice you'd give them?
I would say find your health, because most of the people that I work with who are business experts, really have lost the fundamentals of their health. And it's simply because we're working, and it's not just we're working for a day or a decade or 3 decades, but it's the compounding, right? So it's to find all of that again. We know how to do it, we just don't do it. And so it's really to get a handle on that. And everybody's different, right? Everybody, my profile will be different than yours and different than other people. So it's finding what works. And the other exciting thing that I really want to share with you and your audience is we are living at the convergence of science, technology, and we need to look at that from the point of view of longevity. And I know you and I have talked about longevity and lifespan, and I think it's so important to, if this figure is retiring December 1st, to think about it from, really from the science of aging and what you can do today, meaning the 30th, to impact your longevity way off in the future. And there's so much available in terms of from the universities, from the research centers, from the influencers, the global MDs, PhDs, all the new biotech, device, diagnostic type of companies that are being built around the longevity space. So to be very informed about what is available to you. So it's an exciting time to be alive, and this person retired at the perfect time.
Right. Yeah. And we say it so many times that the health is wealth, because of course, healthcare is very expensive, and the more you can, shield your finances from any sort of healthcare issues, the better off you're going to be to a certain extent, right? But longevity can be a double-edged sword. It'd be great to work for 40 years from 25 to 65 and then be retired from 40 years to age 105, but you'd have to find a way to fund yourself for 40 years. So, but certainly we want everybody to have a long and happy life to live to 105 and beyond, right?
Yes, absolutely. My goal since a little girl was 125. So I'm just laying that on the table. So
125.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. I hope I can make it. Yeah. But with quality, just exactly what you said, with quality of life, right? That's hugely important because I think both you and I know of people and have had experiences in life. We don't want the latter. We want really the quality of, and it really comes down to ourselves. If we really look at the science, it's about the quality of ourselves equals the quality of our life long term.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit and talk about people, probably 20s and 30s. They're thinking about starting their family and getting settled in their career and all that sort of stuff. But I think 40s is usually when people start to get a little bit more serious about their retirement, certainly from a financial standpoint. So what should they be thinking about in their 40s about retirement other than finances?
Yeah, well, okay. So that's a double-edged sword, and I think you know it. So in the finance world, which you cover from top to bottom, we know that it is, from an employee point of view, very difficult to get people to start taking themselves very seriously in terms of retirement and the savings piece of it and the investing piece of it. And similarly, from my point of view, talking to 40-year-olds, unless they've exited a company, and then that's something very, very different. But it is, I think, Brian, I think we're living in a time now where everything is so fast forward that we're really moving in sort of the survival mode. And that means tremendous amount of stress. If they're a young couple, they're going to have young children or not, either or, dual career, but a lot of stuff is going on. So the capacity to add one more thing is extremely difficult. But I think you would concur if I volunteered for you and to say, really think about, it's a strategy, right? It's not just a one-time hit, right? It's a strategy of the laying out of the fundamentals of the retirement planning, right? And executing on that. And it's very similar in terms of the person, the personal piece of it as well, how you are taking care of your health and what you're thinking about long-term. Because it doesn't, as you well know, it doesn't just appear overnight. It's something that has to percolate for a while.
Yeah. Well, Nancy, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the FIRE movement kind of thing, right? Financially independent, retiring early. It seems to get a lot of play and gets a lot of traction on social media. And maybe with the market having kind of a rough year, it's people have had to maybe work a little bit longer and that sort of stuff. But do you think that's something that people should really be focusing on, retiring as early as possible, or do you think that's unhealthy in a way?
Well, I think each circumstance is very different. But if you find yourself in a lucky position to exit early, I'm passionate about the fact that you would find something else to do. You have to have a sense of fulfillment and purpose, be it in a monetary way or not. If you're that, you can buy your own island type of situation, then, the mind needs to be engaged, the body, the soul, all of that, very similar to someone who would be 65 and plus. So I think that, and oftentimes these guys are serial entrepreneurs, Brian. So, they'll go to their island, but they'll be tired of the swimming and the coconuts, after a while, right? And they'll go, I just had a brilliant idea. Let me assemble a team right now, and I'm going to go start this new company. So it's almost like a decompression, like, oh man, we sold it or whatever happened, right? And but then their drive is still there. And I know guys in their 60s and 70s still creating companies because the passion is there for whatever industry that they're in at that moment, right? So, but it's the passion that's there, and that's what's so important. And look how the work world has changed so much, Brian, right? It's not like I have to show up in New York City on Wall Street right now, right? We can be anywhere practically, other than those that are in situation, meaning like a retail design business or high security business or something like that. Those are different entities, but for generally, yeah.
Yeah, and that goal of owning your own island, I don't know, that kind of has a creepy connotation these days. Maybe that's not the goal we should be talking about. Ends up being a lot of weirdos that end up owning their own island. So
well, maybe there's a reason they're weirdos, right?
Yeah,
so they're isolated, right? They're very isolated.
Yeah.
But in today's society, I don't think that would happen so much if one had but again, everybody's individual. I can't speak, everyone's individual. Yeah.
Yeah, and the isolations, we led into that kind of jokingly, but that can happen, even on the mainland, right? I mean, you can retire and suddenly feel very isolated because you went to an office for 8 hours a day, and that was your
no longer. It was your life. Yeah, absolutely.
So how important is it to establish those connections or that outside of the group, even if it's, the local country club or some sort of volunteer project? Have you found people having more success, the ones that maybe start that a few years before retirement?
Some, I'll take my last client. So he was extremely busy and literally lived at the office and Saturdays and Sundays, sometimes when stuff needed getting done. And so he didn't have time but now he's pursuing athletic opportunities within his own town. He's pursuing things that he likes, like he loves outdoor hiking. He loves winter sports. So this is perfect that he can do things like that now. And I really encourage, one, it's the sense of community, and that is huge. You know, be it finding a church, be it finding a mission, a charity, a coffee club of, you know, X individuals from your business. That's huge. And the other situation that I think is really important is to have another person's point of view. So if you and I were going to have this coffee club, let's say we worked at a company together and we both exited at different times, I would say to you, blah, 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 Brian, and you'd say, really, this? I don't know. How about this? I might think this. Oh, I would say, I haven't thought of that. So it's opening up your windows, because we're so ingrained in thinking the same way for 40 years, basically. And so we're needing to evolve. I think that that's really one of my driving pillars, is to say that this is awesome. You've had this incredible career, but at the same time, that's just the start, right? So you've had this passage, which is extraordinary, but now you have the opportunity to really have a white paper. I talk about it's like building a business, because you're going to change your identity, you're changing your habits, your behaviors, and part of that is that community, those relationships that you're building, which are so important to sustain you over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a good point. You really need the financial plan, but you also need the business plan. It's almost like you're a startup retiree, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
you have to look at it that way.
Yeah.
That's really interesting about people getting those connections and how they leave the workforce. Have you found any of that change with your clients over the last couple of years with COVID? Have you seen the mindset kind of shift, good or bad?
In terms of what, retiring or?
Yeah. In terms of what's really important, or the fact that, as we talked about on the phone, people were home for a couple of years and suddenly they're like, gee, maybe I don't want to retire right away. I didn't like being home that much, or maybe the extra time at home was good. Maybe I want to retire a little sooner.
Yeah, I think it can flow both ways, depending on the company, depending on that person and their environment where they are, right? But I think the net is that people realize that communities are very important, relationships are very important, and also to have a sense of who they are, right? And when you're working these really rigorous hours, which we all have done, there's really just time for work product, right? We're not part of that work product. We are, part of the company, right? Mindset. And we have to shift our mindset to ourselves. And I really talk about, for the clients, to really find the priority in you. And that's where I wrote this educational tool. And it really talks about you planning, because when's the last time you planned for you? Really? When? Prior to school? I can't remember any time when I sat down and I thought, man, who am I? I don't know, so it's kind of daunting, some of these questions. And, but it's also very freeing. Once you go through the internal work, it's very, very freeing, because you're like, oh, hey, I like this, or I thought I liked this, but let me go over here. So I want to be very encouraging to your audience that there's a tremendous opportunity out there.
Right. And so many of us are defined by our job title or our career.
Exactly.
And that's the way we introduce ourselves. This is my wife. She's blah, blah, blah. It's my husband, blah, blah, blah. And suddenly now that's gone. So how do you even introduce yourself in some of those spots? So there's so many things that come into retiring that you don't even think about.
Yeah. And that's where the ego gets into play. And, I've had people say to me, man, and Nancy, I was in the who's who of CEOs globally. And I did a lot of work with CFOs similarly. And now who am I exactly? I'm not that exactly what you said. And so it's redefining what is that person, right? Through their passions and, many other different components that really make up the new identity of this person going forward, and which will continue to grow. It's not just, today I picked this, but it's going to continue to grow over time. So it's marinating. It's beautiful.
A lot of people when they retire, chances are they're relatively high up in their occupation or within their company. They're probably in a leadership position. Do you find that there's a struggle sometimes to maybe they go from that to volunteering at the local soup kitchen or something like that, where they're sort of just coming in as to help out as kind of a worker bee? Is it hard for them sometimes to detach from that leadership role?
I think that these people would probably scope out that organization, like, do I like doing the food pantry, or do I like making up the charities like a Red Cross, or, build Habitat for Humanity, or some of these beautiful organizations that we have. And I think that they would probably go on the board if they saw that they could make impact. I always say, before you go on any board, scope it out. Make sure you agree with all their practices, and make sure you like what they really, and are they really doing what they say they do, right? Because we know with charities how that can be. So if that person has that tremendous leadership, I would assume that they would make tremendous impact if they were elected to that board.
Yeah, and a lot of those boards, a lot of those nonprofits will have their their annual meetings. They'll have those right on the website, or even some of the minutes of their regular meetings, so you can go and read through that and check that out. And if it's something local in town, you may know a board member or two anyway.
Exactly, and scope that out, right? Scope that out, because what about the characters of those people? Is there a big presence of someone, or are they all yes people, or what's that candidate's appetite for that type of work?
Yeah, and the professional composition of the board as well. So if you're
Huge.
if you're a retired accountant and they've already got 5 accountants on the board, that might not be a place where you can really add a lot of value, or something.
Right.
Something you're not hugely passionate about. So you mentioned some of your recent clients. So let's step back into that and talk a little bit about your business and how you got into the business and the type of clients you work with.
Thank you. So, well, I did try that charity stuff. And I after retiring for 40 years in global management, what do I love to do? I love to run businesses. And so that's what I created. But I wanted to create it with the struggle that I had, which is, how do I transition from a career into healthy retirement? And the health piece is hugely important to me. And so that's how I've structured that company. And I've written a 12-week proprietary process that's science-based and it's proven. And Brian, you and I have talked about this, that retirement and health seems so simple, but at the same time, can be very complicated, right? And to attack it from a new point of view, because we really haven't been thinking about it. I'm talking about the client really at all for almost 40 years. So it's starting all over again. It's becoming a beginner to owning your own life again, right?
Right, and I think health and wealth are so tied together. I have clients who run a gym, and we talk about that all the time, the similarities. Everybody's looking for a quick way to lose weight. Everybody's looking for a quick way to get rich, right? But it's all about the consistent effort over a long period of time that produces positive outcomes in both scenarios. And they really are tied together a lot.
Yes.
How often, it seems like, trying to think of people who are retired or about to retire, do you find that most people who are well prepared for retirement are well prepared from a health standpoint, or do you find that people, your clients, have been so focused on the accumulation of the wealth part that they've sacrificed on the health side?
In my world, I would say that there's been a tremendous focus on wealth creation, but it comes at a cost, and that cost is their health.
Okay.
So, these are people that are traveling, running businesses, highly stressed time. I mean, imagine running a business during COVID or the pandemic. I mean, it's extraordinarily difficult, right? Leadership globally, it's very, very challenging. We have lived through really, I believe, historic times, because this has been really extraordinary to watch the world really enveloped in these crises, right? And I'm thankful to the healthcare scientists and all these amazing people who have created support for us to find the vaccine, so that now we can be careful, but we can move forward collectively as a world. And I think that this was a time that we're not, I always say we're not global anymore. We just are the world, because we're so interconnected now, right?
As people go into retirement, do you find the physical health or mental health to be a bigger issue?
Well, I think for the first time, generally in someone's career, they may be suffering from first-time health issues. So could be a heart problem or a hearing problem, or the knee went out, you know. And then there's also a fear factor in terms of the mind. So for instance, for me, my mother had Alzheimer's. However, there's nobody else in the family that has it. So how was it that that happened for her? And here she is, highly educated, athletic, almost professional, multi-sports, right? And did all, but what happened, right? So I think that there's a lot of fear factor in and around both the physical and the mental health. And I think that this is a great time to capture the science right now, so we can utilize that. What can we do right now to get you back on the road, on the straight road?
And what is that science? You've sort of teased it a few times here. What's changed over the last decade or half decade or so?
Well, everything has a research project attached to it, proving. So it's not all hocus pocus. And we know best protocols, right, from all these universities. And we know new protocols that are coming out that aren't vetted by the FDA yet, but they are available for, you know, I would say, let's see, what would be the word? You know, really extreme diseases or things that really people need help with to be on trial, you know, these clinical trials. So there's such an opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to relook at my nutrition. Hey, I'm going to relook at my sleep protocols. I'm going to relook at my mind. Am I constantly living in stress? Hey, I don't necessarily have to go to the gym, but what could I do at home or outside in nature? Or, you know, I love winter sports. I love summer sports. What could I do instead of? I want to be outside because I've always lived in a building, or, you know, something like that. So there's all these things that we can work on from really a mindset point of view of changing. And it's proven science. It's out there.
Yeah, and it feels like it's really, really accelerating the new developments and
Yeah.
and the longevity. You know, they say that the person who's going to live to 150 has already been born, or, you know, it might be you actually, Nancy, it might be you.
No, I don't think so. But
then,
Peter DeMatteis, who is one of Tony Robbins' partners, and several other those guys, I think he's gunning for 150, so he'll make it, I'm sure.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, when you get into the wacky world of replacement parts and all that sort of stuff, I mean,
Yes, robotic parts, yes, yeah. I mean, it's you have to love this. You just have to love the creativity, the innovation, the science. I mean, it's so amazing what these scientists are doing for humankind, for everybody, right?
Right, and you hope that it's going to be widely available. I mean, it's not something out of the movies where it's, you know, a few billionaires or trillionaires have, you know, lived to be 500 years old and everybody else suffers. You hope it's a little more widespread than that.
Well, I mean, look, I think about, like, when I got out of college, I worked for an engineering firm, and because those guys were so crazy and they were engineers, they was like, oh, Nancy, you need a computer, and I'm like, $3,000 on my little salary for a computer. And I think the HP printer, which was huge, which I could barely carry to my apartment, I don't know, it was ridiculous, like 2,500, right? Well, now we can go to Costco for pennies, right, and get something. a gajillion times more powerful, right? So I think that the science is going to follow that same model, right? That once we get it out into the marketplace, there's going to be an aggregation of this is for everyone. Yeah, for most things.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
As far as your client base goes, when do people start reaching out to you, or when should they start reaching out to you?
Those are two different data points.
Right.
But I think humans need a sense of urgency.
Mhm.
So I always talk about contacting me in and retirement. So that could mean like, I had a conversation with someone who said, I think I'm planning on, but I'm not sure yet. Next year, there's some things happening in the company. We're looking for a successor, blah, blah, blah. So there's movement, right? So this person knows that probably end of year she'll be out, right? Purposely. I mean, she's planning it, she's designing it. And others, they'll say, well, the company has been acquired, but they're, nobody can know the close of the M&A. No one knows that. Even the street guys don't know it, but they know something's going to happen. On what side are they on? So, or simply that, my partner has retired and I want to retire to do the things that, whatever it is, or vice versa. So obviously the earlier the better, but the reality of really doing this internal work and focusing on yourself, I don't really think is, I mean, unless you're bionic, which I'm sure there are people out there, I just haven't found them yet, but who that could, attack this situation full on to take ownership of themselves while still working full out. I just think it has to have a sense of urgency.
And how about that scenario where you mentioned one spouse, one partner is retired, and the other one isn't? How stressful a few years are those?
So this is interesting. So I placed an incredible woman a couple of years ago now in a major global role, and she told me, my husband at the time, I think he was in his 70s or 80s, and she's in her 50s. So there was really a 20 plus year difference. And she said, I want a really big role because this was going to be her last big role before she really wanted to retire. Because I think it was a sense of the aging process, there's an urgency to that, right? For her husband, she wanted to be together with the husband. I've spoken to another person. It's very individual. She said, my partner will retire in 5 years, but she had an early out. She took an early exit package. And so she was looking for volunteer work and some part-time opportunities to kind of wait it out, if you will, until that 5 year. And they had planned together. Then, of course, they wanted to go traveling because they loved it. They did it on their vacations and whatever. I don't know if they were looking for a home outside of the U.S. I don't know. But they loved the travel piece of it. So everybody's different. So I think really what I'm getting back to you is to say, have that conversation, because you need to communicate. And this is one thing that when you retire, I always say that it's not just you who retires, it's the people around you and the family, because you're different now and they have to get used to that. And it impacts people differently. So have that conversation. So if I was in your household, Brian, I would say, Brian, I'm retiring. I'm, doing this, doing that. And we would see if you would say, well, Nance, that doesn't suit me at all because I'm doing this and that, or we could have a meeting of the minds, right? So I think that there's really a need for empathy for that person who's retiring and an understanding, because they're going through so much that the families don't necessarily, and it's an unknown, right? It's a fear factor, right? It's unknown. Retirement is fearful from the personal point of view. and can be from the financial point of view as well.
Right. And you'd be amazed how many times that people are close to retirement and one spouse has different plans than the other one, as far as
Totally. So
timing
it's
and
like this.
travel and
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. So it's so important to have that conversation uh, sooner rather than later. What are you dreaming about?
Mm.
What would you like to do? For instance, I love travel. My husband's a homebody.
Yeah.
It's like this, you know. Yeah.
And sometimes you might think you like something, you might say you
Right.
want to retire and travel, and after a few long waits at airports and this and that, you might decide it's not your thing.
Right. Right.
So tell me about the people who want to reach out to you and people who where to find you. And I know you do a ton of content. So where else can people find you and learn more about Nancy Schwartz?
Oh, thank you. So I think the best way would be to find me on my website, which is envisionhealthyretirement.com. It's envisionhealthyretirement.com. And on there for your audience is I have a sleep download because it's change of season and holidays and people are always short of
Mm.
sleep. So please, it's free and complimentary. So please download that. And then I also have a discovery call if they're really serious about having a conversation. I am a huge believer in providing value. This is not a sales call. I don't do sales. I'm about providing value. So if that's of interest, and then certainly on all those other social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Insta, and then I have a YouTube channel as well.
Okay. Well, I don't think I'll need the sleep video tonight because I'm a few minutes away from drinking about a gallon of NyQuil. So that should
Oh
do me for tonight.
no! Oh dear! Oh dear!
So tell what's the process like for a client onboarding, if you will? It's probably not the right word, but what's that like early stages?
Right. So I really want to get to know that person
Mhm.
in a big way. And so I will be asking them what is their why. Sometimes people have ideas of what they are envisioning. So we kind of walk through that. I take a detailed health history to find out where they want to be working. They may be working with other people besides myself, right? So I want to get the full picture of who's doing what, where, when. And then I use a proprietary software, Brian, called Practice Better, and it's HIPAA compliant, so it's hugely confidential. And
Great.
that's where all of my modules are released and the worksheets and everything. And we address each lesson a health component and a retirement component.
Mm.
And it's rigorously structured. However, I know it's challenging times still for people out there. So I also have the ability, just because of my 40 years in business, to throw away that playbook. And, several times clients have come to me and said, Nance, look, I have this personal thing or I have something in business. Let's talk this through because I can't move forward. I'm stuck here, right? So I think that that's really, and if I can help them, I offer that as well. So yeah, it's a progression of steps, and I have 6 pillars that we walk through in various different mindsets.
Great, Nancy. Well, I appreciate you giving us half an hour or so tonight. Any last words of wisdom for our audience?
Yes, enjoy your amazing, healthy retirement. Own yourself, plan, design what you want, and then go live it. You're going to be amazing.
Okay, great. That's Nancy Schwartz from Envision Healthy Retirement. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Brian.